How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com. Hey, welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
Doing the thing that we do.
Yeah.
Laura Belmain's here. We're going to be talking to her about some really cool security stuff. But first, how are you doing, my friend? How's the new digs?
Yeah, it's good to be up on the coast. Living by the ocean is always therapeutic. Gradually sorting stuff out. And but it's far enough away. It's about 3 hours from the city. New doctor, new dentist, new pharmacist. You have to sort of figure all this stuff out. So getting recommendations from friends and bit by bit, simplifying your life. Now it's sort of can you go a week without going to the city? Can you go 2 weeks without going to the city? That's kind of the thing. So
you're stacking up firewood is what you're telling me.
Well, that's winter. And, the power lines and the internet come up one set of power poles on that highway. And there are trees.
So do you have a wood-powered generator? Is that how it works up there in the country? No.
We just got a potbelly stove, which is a good thing. And I got a bunch of UPS, and I have Starlink. So I can stay online for a little while. We'll see how much UPS she who must be obeyed allows me to have.
You might be able to invent a beaver treadmill. That might provide some,
This is more otter country than beaver. We'll work on it. I can feed the beaver. The otter's the right thing.
Get the moose on the treadmill.
We had elk in the driveway. Well, listen, black bears don't bother me. You know this, right? I've dealt with black bears all my life. It's not a big deal. But elk are a problem. They're very large.
They're also tasty.
Yeah,
Especially when you mix the meat with pork fat.
Yeah. Well, there was a dozen of them standing in the driveway as we're coming in and right where we want to put the truck, sort of look at her and go, we could go to the pub. And she's like, yeah, let's go to the pub. We just backed back out our driveway, went to the pub for a couple hours. They were gone when we got back.
Laura's looking at us like she's on the wrong podcast.
I'm loving this. I live in New Zealand, and so we don't have elks. We have
there are no
possums
natural mammals in New Zealand.
We have one. We have a bat. And it's teeny tiny and endangered, and none of our birds fly because we have no mammals and predators.
Yeah,
so, we're not good at this. So I listen to this and I'm like, yeah, we can get beavers and otters and make electricity and then go to the pub. All of this is great.
Yeah.
You have sheep though. They're tasty.
We have more sheep than people and more cows than sheep. So
and not by a little either. It's 10
significantly.
It's a lot of sheep.
All right, so enough of the bonus chit-chat. Let's get started with Better Know Framework. Roll the crazy music.
Okay. All right, man, what do you got?
What I got is an article that I found on LinkedIn, and it's Don't Bet Against the Cloud by Kendall Miller.
I know Kendall.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so basically the article discusses why there's this swing back towards self-hosting after years of, businesses increasingly relying on cloud services. And even though some companies like Amazon Prime Video and 37 Signals have cut costs by moving away from cloud service providers, CSPs, there's still a strong case, so he says, for sticking with cloud solutions. And he's right.
Sure. Yeah.
These cloud services like, Amazon, Google, Microsoft Azure offer flexibility, which is a game changer for businesses. And, you read this and it seems like common sense, but why is this, why are people moving away and saying, no, we're going to do it ourselves? Why the sudden change? And it's not sudden, it's a gradual change.
It's a gradual change. I think it's a right sizing. It's certainly been a topic on Run As, is figuring out what payloads make sense in the cloud, what don't. Let's face it, if you're 37 Signals, you're already running a 24-hour-a-day NOC, right? You already have the infrastructure, so do you want to monitor somebody else's machines that you pay for by the hour, or do you want to monitor your own? That's sort of a balancing act you can get into.
Do you think it has anything to do with trust? Like, are people losing trust in the clouds because they're rock solid?
Yeah, they're much more reliable than any home run implementation. Again, but if you're committed to 3 shifts of sysadmins working around the clock to keep things up, so you're already paying for an awful lot of infrastructure, the numbers start to make sense. That AWS story about moving off of serverless onto VMs is an interesting one, because that's also a story about right sizing. What's great about serverless is that it costs you nothing when nothing's happening. But what if you have a service that has tens of thousands of instances all of the time? Like, why are you paying for that efficiency when you don't need it? You could easily run VMs that are under full load all of the time.
And you'd get state for free. So,
well, and a bunch of architectural differences. Like, I think it's just this statement and Kendall's whole story, I read it a while ago. It speaks to the maturation of an industry, that we're getting to a place where there is a debate of on-prem, in cloud, hybrid. What are the commits? What's the reliability? Like, there's a mixture there. There is no one right solution.
I think if I could just add something, I think there's a little bit of a thing that we overlook when we look at the diversity of companies using those platforms. If you go and you're a mid-sized company, you go and you're like, right, we're going to go AWS, great, wonderful. You go stand at that configuration page, that initial page, and choose the services you need. And it is like standing at one of those restaurants that's got like 100 items on the menu. Yeah. There is something for everyone, but somehow you still leave slightly hungry and confused. And so a lot of folks, very quickly adopted, these people over here were using serverless. Let's go do that, and went all in. And they went and they tried this, and it's really easy to blow up your budget and to not have the best performance and scaling, because you haven't quite grasped the complexity of using all of those parts together. And outside of our large organizations who have the expertise to really rein that in, I can understand the temptation, if that's got carried away, to go back to something simpler. I think it would be really good as we enter this next stage of maturation in the CSPs for them to actually simplify a little. Yeah. There's an entire group of audiences who don't need 90 options. They need 4, and them to be really easy to navigate and to work with. Yeah. Exactly. It's great that we can do anything we want, but like when we build software, should we really be doing all of that craziness? No. Well, actually, some design patterns work, and we can just use those really easily.
Yeah, and
just because you can
doesn't mean you should.
I sound like my mom. I've reached that stage.
But it's funny that we've had these conversations, like with Layla Porter, talking about the sort of right sizing of the monolith versus the microservices, right? It's like, hey, microservice makes a lot of sense when we have a team of 100. When you have a team of 3, it seems like overkill. So, I think the same thing happens inside of the cloud. It's like they're effective strategies. And I do, as I'm close to this stuff, because I'm talking to all these experts all the time on the shows, you can see them starting to consolidate one set of access policies that apply to all products like that. But we're in the early days, so they're right sizing too.
I've never had such a discussion from a Better Know framework before. This is great.
It's good.
But it's but one topic that we're going to talk about today, and Richard's going to bring up another one from a comment. Who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment of show 1827, the one we did early in 2023 with Tanya Janka. I entitled the show because it was the name of her book, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security.
Yeah.
Great book. Tanya was a howl, and a local to us. So for me, anyway, in Victoria, just across the island that I'm staring at from here. And our friend Hilton Giesenau out of South Africa, who's been on the show before as well, made this point. He said, "Hey, Richard, question in the show about what to do about having your multi-factor accounts only on a single device, a smartphone, which travels with you and can get lost or stolen." And I talked about how complicated the backups and recovery strategies were for those things. Like, that's a challenge for most people to do right. He goes on to say a simple solution is to have a second device, like a tablet or a cheap older phone or even a watch with a backup of all those accounts. Both Google and Microsoft Authenticator have the ability to export and import across devices. Mm-hmm. I've never tried this, but it might even be useful to use that to back up accounts for others. And I'm trying to push she who must be obeyed into starting to use Authenticator. So maybe this is something I got to put in front of her. It's like, look, don't worry. We'll have a backup sitting on your tablet. So if that happens to your phone, you're going to be okay.
I can actually make a suggestion here because I have a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old, which means that my resilience policies have to be really good. My devices do not last long. Yes. And I learned this the hard way when my 5-year-old decided to play the game Does It Swim? I don't need to elaborate on what happened there. Anywho, wet device doesn't do well at multi-factor authentication. Now, I'm not commercially involved with it, but I use an app called Authy for my non-critical work account. Now, that automatically will allow you to move all of your authenticators between devices. So instead of me having to migrate before the bad thing, I can actually pull that down onto a new device. Now, yes, there's risks in here. I'm a security person. Like, I literally
that's just
look at
another
risks all day.
Of your secrets somewhere.
Yeah, but, from the review I've done, the risk versus me losing access entirely or me managing secure backup code somewhere, like there was going to be something somewhere.
Sure.
And I think especially if these are your non-critical accounts, so I'm not saying put your CSP root account passwords in this thing, but, if it's, someone significant in your life and they're looking for a little bit of resilience, that could be a really good solution.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. And that's Twilio that makes Authy. Twilio's our friends of the show also.
Absolutely.
So, had nothing bad to say about that. It's a good product. And Hilton, goodness knows you've got a copy of Music to Code By already, but thanks so much for your awesome comment. I hope you and your family are well. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
Yeah. And another way that you can get a copy of Music to Code By is sending us a tweet from X or a toot from Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Mastodon.com?
At mastodon.social.
Oh, okay.
Honest.
Really?
And it's been for every show that you've mentioned it.
I don't know. I'm having
And now you're questioning.
I'm now having questioning myself.
Yeah, you're having a moment.
Yeah, I'm having a moment.
So it must be the haircut. I think it's it.
Must be. All right. Well, let's introduce our guest today, who we've already heard from. Laura Belmayne is a global secure development leader, a best-selling author and speaker, helping software development leaders worldwide engage their entire team in building secure software. And officially, welcome to the .NET Rocks show, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. Apologies for jumping into your conversation. This is a really fun podcast.
You made it better by jumping in.
We're never going to complain when smart people are talking about smart things. It makes me happy every time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a Kiwi to boot. I was born in New Zealand, although I sound like an American, and I live in Canada.
Where were you born?
Tauranga.
Wow. Okay.
Family farms on Ohuiti Road.
Wow. For those who don't know New Zealand at all, we're a tiny island, and that's a tiny place on a tiny island. Like that's very, very
with
specific.
Lots of hills and cows and sheep.
So I brought Carl to the farm once, and when we got into the rental car, and it was a Holden Commodore, of course. At the airport, I said, "Listen, over the next couple of hours while I'm driving, you're going to see me randomly turn on the windshield wipers. That's because they've switched the position of the windshield wipers and the turn signals, and I keep screwing them up. So when you're wondering why does Richard keep hitting the windshield wipers, no reason. That's why."
It was a delightful trip, though, and your aunts were amazing.
Yeah, they're great people, and the Nee family, which is my eldest aunt, married into this family whose the grandfather was a homesteader. He's original Ohuiti settler. There's literally roads named after the road at the bottom of his farm is Nee Road, right? Like it's super old school. And they have every so often if I'm lucky enough when I'm there, they have a party for the Ohuiti settlers. They're amazing people, but these are genuine farmers that have grown up there and they've seen their city change and so forth. Like they're hilarious.
I was on the edge of my seat waiting for Gandalf to pop out from behind the rocks and trees. He never did, though. No. Never saw any hobbits.
All green rolling hills. But,
beautiful.
Hopkins down the road in Matamati.
So anyway, Laura Belmain, tell us what you've been thinking about and talking about lately. I bet it has something to do with secure applications.
It does, but it also, so I've been going to a lot of conferences, as you do. I tend to cluster them together and do these like weird little holidays with like 3 or 4 conferences because everywhere's far from where I live. And I've been hearing a lot about developer toil, that we're all very sad and we're all very tired and everything is hard right now. And I get it. And so we've been having a bit of an existential crisis in security of whether we in DevSecOps and kind of in moving security into the dev space that we're making people even sadder and even worse. So we've been talking a lot about where security needs to be versus where it doesn't need to be, and which parts of it actually are just making things worse and more painful. And so, a lot of conversation about that at the moment, because if I'm honest, I'm kind of bored. I'm bored of the conversation always being, hey, we found 3 vulnerabilities and we found 5 last month and therefore we're more secure now. I think we can do better. Than just like looking back at our code and going, looks all right. I want to kind of make security a little less painful and a little bit more focused on, what if security really was part of software quality?
Right.
How would we measure it then? And how would we approach it if it wasn't this weird separate standalone thing that we all get to later when somebody makes us?
Yeah. Well, that comes down to what are the unit tests for security then, isn't it?
Partially, but for me, it's going old school with like the ilities, right? It's not just, does it work, does it not? It's not just straightforward tests. If we look at performance and scaling, very few organizations have really got structured tests around that now. There's a lot of, more subjective appreciation, and then there's logging and monitoring and observability that comes into it.
Right.
But I don't think we have that maturity in security to assess where we're at.
Yeah.
Because most of it really is take code, scan code, find things or not find things.
Hope for the
best. I really want to kind of explore and play with how we already examine our software and what we can learn from a security perspective from the things we already do in development.
I mean, I love the idea of including in my CI/CD pipeline, like the latest script kiddie attacks, just running against it said, did you get anywhere?
Yeah.
Although it's complicated, like you've got to get to an external host and poke in, like that.
Yeah, and
got to find a script kiddie.
Absolutely, they're really hard to catch. And you have to throw the ball multiple times and give them a berry, and I
keep spraying them with water, but they come back.
Maybe they just like it. Maybe they like the elks.
You can stay.
When we get down to it, you look at people like. There was a gentleman, James, his name's going to escape me because I've now tried to say it out loud, and that's the rule of names, who did a lot of work on automated security testing. So this was the time where things like BDD security started coming out, and they were Cucumber-style tests that were written around open source testing and scanning frameworks for security. And there was a lot of push at that period for getting those into CI/CD pipelines. The problem is that the way that the underlying tools they hook to do that work, they're very slow tools. And so it exploded pipelines everywhere and everyone got sad. And then we ended up with parallel pipelines. And before we knew it, we were back to where we started. I think you're talking
about James Wicker.
That's the one. I know it's a W. Brains are funny things. Yep. Thank you so much. So yes, Jay, and the work he did at that time, there's not a lot of activity in that space at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of now how to build AI that builds your tests for you in security. But it would be good to see how we could approach that differently. I think the big problem in that space was always the underlying tools that we were hooking into. So we couldn't do this from, just a raw perspective. We had to hook an open source tool. Those open source tools weren't built to be run in tiny components. They're big frameworks that it tries to run a huge thing. Same with load
testing's got that same problem, right? If you really want to load test, it's a complicated set of tools.
Absolutely. I'm genuinely excited that I think we can do some really cool stuff in this space, but I think the focus and unfortunately the money in security is very much at those kind of code scanning, kind of glossy things. And I think it's going to take more dev focus for us to make this more practical and something we can control ourselves in the dev space rather than relying on external things?
Yeah, over on the sysadmin side, I've talked to so many InfoSec folks who are just so frustrated. It's like, we see the vulnerabilities. We have brought them forward to leadership. Leadership has said, we don't think this is that big of a risk. We're not spending money on it until it explodes.
Yeah, there's an interesting conversation actually just started in the last couple of years in digital safety about the old recurring theme of software liability and warranties. Right. And, there's an argument that it will take us moving to having to be liable or have full warranties for the software you build for people to care, which I have many thoughts and feelings on, and that's a pretty scary area. But you can see historically how that would. Yeah. I mean,
arguably, Bill Gates' real contribution to the world, when they strip it all the way down 100 years from now, will be he wrote the original EULA, or rather his father, the lawyer, did. But eliminating responsibility for software or limiting that liability to the price you paid for it. There's an argument at the time, at least, 50 years ago, that this is what will allow for rapid innovation. But now it seems like a real liability that we just have no reason to become professionals because we have no liability.
Absolutely. And, if you're writing an e-commerce site and selling widgets to people, cool. All right. I get the financial liability stuff. But if your software, I was talking to them, I collect the stories of amazing engineers who are building crazy things from sci-fi. That's like my nerd hobby. And, I was talking to this team and they're like, so we have built these amazing remote control cars. And I'm like, hang on, no, that's not tech. And they're like, no, like full size cars that are remote controlled over thousands of kilometers in airports. And I'm like,
okay,
cool. So we started realizing that, this massive piece of software that was attached to a standard car. So these are not custom built vehicles. They have taken a sedan or whatever and retrofitted some remote control tech into it.
Right.
And they're in an airport. And I'm like, wow, from a security point of view, that's one thing. But from a health and safety point of view,
there's
a lot going on there.
Worth of moving machinery? Because that seems concerning.
In a busy environment. And like this, it's hard to be a security person right now because you're torn in two. There's half of me that's like, oh my goodness, there is amazing technology everywhere and look what we're doing and it's cool. And the other half of me is like, can I just go lie down, please? This is fairly terrifying.
Well, and aside from the tech, probably one of the biggest vectors for security attacks is social engineering, isn't it? And things that we don't think about because we're tech focused. Software developers don't think about these side channel attacks that can happen. I heard one story about people who are trying to listen in on other people's conversations by connecting microphones to the plumbing. And you don't think about it, but your sink is listening to you, and you put a microphone on the pipe, and you can actually hear everything that people in the room are saying. There's a really good example of something. Oh, but this room is out, has got the security surveillance and the cameras and fine. But all right, what are you doing about the sink?
Absolutely. There was a glorious video from it a number of years ago now, but some very smart scientists discovered that they could monitor a plant that was in the room, and they could look at the vibrations on the plant, and they could actually extract the conversation from a room based on the minute movements of a plant. And like, part of me is like, wow.
That's so
like,
cool.
It is so cool. Like, and you know what? Security can be all doom and gloom. Absolutely. Lots of terrible things can happen. I will not understate those. But at the same time, I think the future of security doesn't just need people like me with massive anxiety problems that turned it into a career. Then you've got to be excited about the technology and the potential of it.
Right.
Not everything is going to change the world, but to one or two people, it might.
To be able to work on the let's mute our plants problem rather than the really SQL injection, really?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, there's an underlying truth about that, though. There's a reason that the OWASP Top 10 hasn't changed much from 2003 till now.
Yeah.
And that's because we're still approaching it in the same way we have 20 years ago.
More or less writing software the same way.
Well, I know for a fact that two-factor authentication has saved my butt several times. Every once in a while, I get an email that says, hey, we got a request to change your password. If this wasn't you, then just ignore this. Otherwise, here's the code. I think I'm going to ignore that. Thank you very
ignore that one. It's a conversation we had on Run As. I think it was with Sammy Leho, who said, hey, look, multi-factor's worked well enough that it's actually moved it off the top. It's now number 2. And what's on top is unpatched servers. And that brought up this whole conversation of we're super cautious about patchy servers because sometimes it breaks things, but that's now a higher risk than the possibility of the breaking. So it's like, it's better to deploy the patch quickly and deal with the consequence that it is to stay unpatched.
And what do you do about grandmas that insist on clicking on links in emails and text messages that, that remains probably one of the biggest threat vectors, this social engineering stuff. There's no tech that can protect you from that.
There never will be, and there never has been. So I love the fact that security has invented fancy words for all of these things. But in essence, human beings are jerks and have always been jerks. For as long as there have been people, we have done whatever we could, whether it was lying, cheating, stealing, applying the technology of the time to get things we wanted. Yeah. And so it's evolutionary. It's part of our culture is the willingness to bend the truth, to bend the rules, and to change our behavior such that we get gain. Now, you can't fix that with a web application firewall.
Yeah.
Because, as engineers, we're problem solvers. So we problems over here, cool. I'm going to take any pathway to get there and I'm going to build something great, wonderful. And some of us build beautiful systems and some of us build things made out of duct tape and good intentions. And it doesn't matter. It's a different style of engineering. And our attackers are exactly the same. They are creative. They are very objective focused. They want, the shiny shirt, or they want to go and, get the money, or they want to get political influence, whatever it is. And they'll take whatever path. It's an infinite problem space. And at the moment in security, we're very narrowly focused because it helps us focus and it's all we can do on this vulnerability class or this vulnerability class. But we overlook the fact that if you take that one away, something else will spring up. So it has to be more holistic.
Yeah.
And constant and vigilant.
Constant,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good recruiting campaign for security, to be honest. I'm just telling you, you're constantly learning and you'll always fail. So yeah, I don't know why we do it really.
Yeah. It's only mentioned when, although every security person I know is busy. Like nobody's being laid off in this space either. There's only more work.
Yeah.
So it's as frustrating as it may be. And I appreciate your sense of weight and concern because it can be weighty and concerning. It's certainly, there's no lack of things to do. It's just, I think it's going to be very frustrating to have the same conversations over and over and over. Before we go on, why don't we take a brief break?
Sure. We'll be right back.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey.
Talking to our friend Laura Belmain a little bit about, you go into the agile side of security, which I find interesting. We've been talking about the whole shifting left of security. I just don't, and yet most of the time security is still applied after the V1's out the door. So how do you even talk about shifting security left?
I'm going to be a bit controversial. I'm really sorry. People will have feelings and opinions. Please put them in comments and things.
Hey, get more listeners for our show. That's not a problem for us.
I think what's really happening with shifting left is if you shift left for long enough, it ends up in the sea. And that's what's happening. We go, all right, it's not our team anymore. We're going to pass it to that team. And that team go, cool, we don't have the time. And there's another team. And they pass it on. And what we're seeing time and time again, the focus on shift left is limited in two ways. Firstly, you even see it in the language of the tools and techniques we do. They talk about from development to deployment, as if that's the entire process.
Because that's the whole loop, man. Nobody actually runs
absolutely. Nothing else happens.
There's no planning. There's no architecture, design, none of that.
Exactly. The light of software just descends upon us. We instantly know.
We develop it.
Exactly.
We deploy
just like that.
We get beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Customers buy it. We go home. Yeah.
Yeah, job done. It's weird that we're all still employed. I don't know why that would be. Yeah. So all of our things focus on that stage. So writing code through to deployment. Now that leaves two startlingly big gaps. It leaves maintenance and support. So those tools that you have out in the world that are now in BAU, there's minimal changes happening. Now that's especially true if your architecture has been fragmented in some way, such that, a component actually has a singular purpose or a small number of purposes, and you work on other components to do the rest. So microservices folk have this a lot. It's never built. How are your fancy security processes ever going to apply again if that thing is never being built?
Yeah.
Because everything's built into the deployment pipeline, into the build pipeline. And at the other end, we talk about threat assessment, and I love that the movement is starting to get some energy. But we still fall back on that urge we have to, how can I automate that? Now, threat assessment is very difficult for you to automate. And that's hard to hear as an engineer, because you want to go, I just want to make the tool do it for me, and then I can do other things like drink coffee. But
sometimes
threat assessment,
you got to look around.
Yeah, sometimes you actually just have to, plan a bank robbery with your friends. That's just how you have to operate. And so we've got to find space for this. We've got to start talking about development security around more than just that middle section and more than just the people who write the code. It needs to be everybody in the team.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be lots of work. Like we run a very kind of lightweight program. It's completely free, called 1 hour AppSec. So we aim to get folks in dev doing 1 hour of security stuff every sprint. That's it. Just 1 hour, 60 minutes. But if you imagine the impact of doing that across, 100-person team, that's a lot of security every sprint. So those minute changes across all the roles can have a huge impact. But at the moment, unfortunately, Shift Left and DevSecOps and the Agile movement really is focused on that CI/CD pipeline and that middle chunk.
Right. Which again is trying to automate the problem away rather than, the problem. And I think you described this really well. It's not Shift Left. It's everybody fights. That everybody has to be part of the solution here. And this is something that a Scrum Master could easily manage. That, hey, we're starting up a sprint. Let's do our hour. What are you going to work on?
Absolutely.
Let's get this at the front of the sprint, talk through the security elements before we go anywhere else almost.
Absolutely. And, if you're wise with your hour, the first time you do it, you think about a thing. The second time you do it, you've got the guardrail that you did the last time you did this.
Right. And you can build on it.
And, these artifacts start to naturally, you kind of get created as part of it, and they iterate as you go. And there is no done. There is no perfect in security. No. So if we park that idea entirely, what we have is an awareness and behaviors that we try and consistently apply. So you can look at this in any part of your life, like a gym membership, right?
Yeah.
Buying the gym membership isn't actually going to do anything for you.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Gym membership? What is this?
What?
Yeah, we do them in New Zealand.
Never heard of this thing.
In between the sheep and the cows, there's gyms.
Sorry. Foreign concept.
So whatever it is, it's not buying the thing isn't going to get you there.
Yeah.
But consistent application and shared participation, group participation will get you there. So, I think perhaps I'm like the security equivalent of a hippie, but that's okay. I really do think that there are no superheroes in security. There is nobody that's going to come and do it for us in our team and make it all go away. The best thing you can do is find little things, do them consistently, automate the ones you can that make sense, and the ones that you can't do. If you're anything like me, I'm truly interrupt driven and horribly distracted. So create little robots that tell you need to go do your thing.
Right.
And the easier you make that for yourself, suddenly we have a huge movement that isn't led by specialist security engineers. We still need them for a variety of reasons. But what if the majority of software security was in the dev team? It was just part of what we do.
A little bit of time so that you built up a set of guardrails that you could use over and over again.
So when you're doing pen testing, for example, how much of that can you automate versus doing manually?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Carl.
Thank you.
We're going to get in trouble, so let's do it.
Excellent.
I did about 7 years as a pen tester, so I've been very deep in that. I've also been a red teamer, so where the more advanced sort of customized level. Now, it really does depend on the pen test company. So I'm going to blanket hand wave statement.
Nice.
But a lot of the early stuff in a pen test, so what we'd call reconnaissance, is absolutely automated and has been for a number of years. Vulnerability scanning, which is the next stage,
sure.
also heavily automated. Mm-hmm. Now, if I could give the audience a little bit of advice, pen testing is really expensive. Mm-hmm. Your aim with a pen test is to make your pen tester cry. Yeah. You want them to be having to work so hard. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the stuff that's automated, that reconnaissance, the information gathering, the running vulnerability scanning, that you should be doing yourself. You can do that with open source tools. There is no magic there. And there is no magic in pen testing at all. In fact, if you're a dev, if you wanted to get into the space and learn a bit more about it, there's some really great free resources by BugCrowd. So the bug bounty platform, they have a little university that you can go and just free of charge. There's no sign up or anything. You just watch their videos and things and learn how this all works. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize that there's this whole foundation that you can do and then automate to mean that by the time you get to a pen test, they really do have to focus on that really manual custom effort. And that's what we want. In a pen test, they will only do as much manual effort as they have time to do. Right. So if they're finding lots of junk with the vulnerability stuff, they'll never get to it. So, yeah, it's a bit of a strange situation. But to answer your question, Carl, you want to force them to do as much of it as possible and do it for them.
Yeah. So your real value is going to come when they're deep down the pipeline.
Yes.
Dealing with the hard stuff.
Yep.
But if you've only paid for X many hours, if they can knock you out with a simple, you have this port open.
Exactly.
Or this server's not been patched.
I just love it when questions are like, what is that?
Yeah. And there's a lot of folks who will say, hey, never share your code with the pen testers either. And I would absolutely argue with that, because a pen test is scoped, it's time scoped. So you've only got 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. And if you imagine as an engineer, you were given a system and you were told, find the most, vulnerable, valuable parts of it. And you've got 2 weeks to do it and you can't see the source code, you're really going to struggle. Yeah. So if you want to get to the really juicy bits and get those bits that are really sensitive tested, it's really important to safely find a way to get them that access so they can then dig in and then pull back and then go deeper on that research.
Not only that, but your average pen tester probably has enough knowledge to go criminal if they really wanted to, but they've decided not to. They decided to apply their talents to the powers of good. So you should be able to trust them. How's that for a blanket statement? Oh, I can see the emails are coming in already.
Absolutely.
But yeah, don't waste their time with the simple vulnerabilities. Knock all of those out.
Do the boring basics, right? Our brains are funny. We love dopamine. And so we love focusing on the really novel challenges and the new things. And so we intentionally or unconsciously avoid those boring basics that trip us up every time. And if we can be conscious of that and we can work on those, then it really does get us much further along our security journey.
I mean, it is kind of an embarrassment to be tipped over by any of the OWASP 10. These are known, they're well documented. I'm not saying all of them are simple to fix, but they're just you can scan for these, you can look for, you're doing the right things on this stuff and just at least get that much done.
And you were saying you're bored by SQL injection, but I mean, that still is very high on the OWASP list.
Number 1, number 2, still.
Well, even if you just look at it as a puzzle, SQL injection actually is a really incredible puzzle when you start looking at it from a playful perspective.
Yeah.
So, at its simplest, and you start seeing authentication bypasses, you're kind of meh. But when you start to understand that people are using SQL in really ugly, disturbing ways to blindly work through and around your database without knowledge of the schema, without any understanding of the other components, and they're using it to extract data up to the point where they're using either, the query speed to determine an answer, or they're pulling it out a single character at a time. That to me is, there's a fascinating challenge there.
Right.
And so if you can appreciate the tech behind the challenge, it's not just, hey, and all 1 equals 1. That's where we start. But like anything in engineering, it's much, much bigger, and it's as powerful as SQL is itself. And SQL is ridiculously powerful. So, if anyone at home's going, well, how do I, learn to care about this more? go deep on it. Go have a look at the really ridiculously dirty SQL that gets written in the offensive space. It's not bad SQL. It's just SQL doing things that you would never, as a polite person, try to do yourself.
It seems to me, so I do this security show, podcast called Security This Week, and I am not the expert. I'm the dumb guy asking questions. But Dwayne LaFlotte is one of the guys on there, and he is like, when I say he could go rogue and make twice the money that he's working, he definitely could be evil if he wanted to. But I think like you, his reaction to an elegant hack is, the more dangerous it is, oh, this is awesome. It's like he appreciates the evil mind that went into creating this attack,
There is something about how folks in offensive security see the world and see systems that is really interesting. To be able to take a complex system and, tilt your head in the right way and press this command, and to even be able to think like that and to have that process of exploration and play, coupled with the technical ability to then pull that off is really interesting. And while, 90% of what we see out there is noisy automated junk, there are in amongst that the people who are coming up with these new attacks and these new vulnerabilities who are really very creative thinkers. And you, as an engineer, you've got to respect that.
You think they put their minds to more meaningful work, right? I mean, that my general experience with criminals is like they're criminals because they don't want to work that hard.
Oh, you've lived in small towns, haven't you?
He's like New Zealand.
I grew up in a small town that was famous for two things: teenage pregnancy and car theft. That was pretty much our claims to fame.
Hobby.
Yeah, that was it.
They literally the cars.
So they used to call it joining the family business. And, you were either building a family or robbing cars. And what happens is you started to understand crime in a way that you didn't even understand why you understood it. And I think as I've gotten older, there are some very common, very basic reasons that people commit crime, but there are also some very interesting ones.
Right.
There's a lot of psychology in there, and it's a really fascinating space. And a lot of the vulnerability researchers out there don't have a criminal bone in their body.
Sure.
That's, why they do what they do. But they're insatiably curious.
Yeah.
And they think differently, and the way that they've channeled that energy is it's not even intentionally malicious. It's just that their perception of right and wrong don't match ours.
Right.
It's a very interesting space, especially in electronic crime. Physical crime's a little bit different, but in the electronic space.
Yeah.
Have you discovered any 0 days? Because I know that's like the holy grail of like security.
Not in a good many years. I unfortunately used to work for the UK government, so even whatever I discovered wasn't allowed to be put out there in the world. So my days of that are gone.
Yeah. No, that's a whole other a different aspect of the work too, right?
Hunting.
Well, and you also think about it's the cloud providers that seems to be at the front of this now because they have a super vested interest. If there's a 0 days exploit that might affect the cloud and affect their customers, that's bad for them, irrespective of how it is for their customers. So
you just have to look at Heroku from a couple of years ago. One vulnerability in a platform as a service now, not one of the major ones now, but in its day, it's still got 13 million customers. But a compromise there affected 13 million customers, at least 20,000 live applications, including dial-in meeting systems, online doctors, and information health sharing.
Yeah.
So, if you're an attacker and you're being super cost effective, you don't want to go and attack every single person individually. You're going to pick these big shared components, whether it's a shared framework that everyone uses,
Log4j,
or CMS. That's why WordPress is, always got a target on its back because it is so widely used, or the platform themselves. If you can compromise anything in AWS's environment, it would be, Christmas a million times over for an attacker. It's a hot
concentration of wealth, essentially, of all of resources being spent. Well, I remember Meltdown Inspector and going, oh man, the cloud people are going to freak out. Not that there was ever a successful exploit against this, but just the prospect that you might be able to see data from a different tenant because it happened to be running on the same machine. You know, for a tech guy like me who's deeply into the hardware, I'm like, I love this. And the fix for it is hard. Like it genuinely, they knock down 10% of the performance of processors to box that in. But, and I think about a guy like Scott Guthrie at the head of Azure, like this is the stuff that would keep him awake at night.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of security vulnerabilities a company can come back from. And in fact, if you look at companies that have big security breaches and look at their share price, you'll see a blip, but you will actually see it go up afterwards.
You know, and therein lies the real problem. There seems to be no consequences to getting exploited.
Oh, no.
Like
none.
Virtually nothing. For crying out loud, Ashley Madison's still in business. They get fully exploited. They prove that their business is a lie, and they're still in business.
I have no comment as an American. No comment. Did you see that vulnerability? I think it was last year or something. And it was in memory chips where hackers found that they could, by just hitting a certain memory register over and over and over again, they raised the heat so much in that register that it actually sets the bit next to it, flips it from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. And that bit is an important bit in, like allowing access or something like that. It was just unbelievable. How does anybody protect themselves against that kind of thing?
It's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is. But the thing is, we need to remember, again, going back to that dopamine part of our brain, we can be fascinated by those big edge case ones, but it's highly unlikely those are going to be the type of things we would deal with.
No, sure. I know.
So
I just wanted
unfortunately, we have to hold on to them.
I wanted to provide a little doom and gloom here because this is
I love
entirely too happy here.
It makes me feel at home. You've welcomed me in true security fashion.
Yes.
Next, can we talk audit frameworks? Because then I'll know that we're friends.
We don't have enough existential dread on this show. Yeah. Let's talk audit frameworks.
Fabulous.
I mean, the employer, the leadership ask us this question: are we secure? They ask that question, and how do you not just lie to them? Like, because there's no way to know,
right? To the best of our knowledge,
we crave certainty.
Yeah,
we crave concrete answers, not just in security and everything, really. And this is one of those areas that we can't. There isn't one.
The best I was able to do as an IT manager, talking to leadership, was like, listen, I think we're at a place now where it's like we have a club on our steering wheel. It's not that they can't steal the car if they really want the car. It's that our car's now a pain in the butt to steal. And so maybe they'll steal something else. Like we're going to be okay with drive-bys because we've done the fundamentals. But if someone's genuinely targeting you, there's not that much you can do. Like it's very, very hard.
Forget about the car. Steal the beaver treadmill.
There you go. I think we went with otters on that, actually. Didn't we go with otters? Yeah.
Oh, you did. You did.
I got otters. Let me tell you. I think they're around. Little buggers. Destructive little buggers. So, Laura, tell us a bit about SafeStack, because this seems to be something important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So SafeStack is my company. We're just 13 people. So company in that scale, not in like global enterprises. And we call it for profit, but with massive purpose. So we are on a mission to try and give everyone in development the skills that they need to build secure software. So whether you're a product person, a UX person, developer, tester, analyst, architect, everyone has something to do. And so we intentionally built a platform so you can learn things. And there's a free plan, like no strings, no credit cards. You can go check it out. And then we reinvest a part of the revenue from that. So when, big banks and things come and work with us, and we offer a few cool things. So we have our free plan. We have parity pricing around the world. We also give free training to every single computer science student in New Zealand and Australia.
Nice.
So we're trying to use, a business to grow a foundation of people with the skills needed to kind of naturally do security as part of building software. We love that there's a whole community of specialists who are in, AppSec and things, but the future for us is about everyone doing a little bit. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, in some ways, better use those specialists' time. So they're not working on the fundamentals either. We're all working on the fundamentals, and they can work on those edgier cases.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
exactly that.
So education, just get people more knowledgeable about doing the right things.
Yeah. So we have courses and qualifications and hands-on labs. We have playbooks and templates. So for anything we're doing, you should be able to go from I now know about the thing to I can do a thing. And we also have a community where you can come together with other people and ask anonymous questions and say, hey, this is hard. I'm struggling with this. What have you done? So instead of, just going to the internet and going, hey, here's all of my vulnerabilities and laundry, please help me. There are some intentionally built spaces for you to get some help and support.
Nice.
And we're now working with about 17,000 engineers from 89 countries. So there's quite a breadth of experience in there. Everyone from teeny tiny 2-person nonprofits all the way up to big banks and airlines. So you've got really everyone at every stage of that maturity cycle.
Awesome.
Have you ever seen Hack the Box, hackthebox.com?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, because who doesn't know about it? But in the security space, this is a place where you can come together and try to break into a machine.
Yeah.
And that's a really good exercise to do. And maybe you do that in your training classes too. I don't know.
Yeah, so we've got an intentionally vulnerable crypto exchange that we built as part of ours. So you can play around and find the vulnerabilities in that. But there are some wonderful platforms even outside of our own. So Hack the Box is one. But even in the free space, if you're listening and you want to just get started and play around and hack something, OWASP have a project called Juice Shop, which is a Node application, but it's a Docker container. You can just download it and off you go. And it's a little juice shop, as it says on the label, and you can find the vulnerabilities, you can play, and you can hack those. So there's lots of really fun and free, in many respects, places you can go to explore and play. And I can't understate how important it is that when you're learning security, you don't approach it from a true academic, I want to learn everything about cryptography way, but that you engage that bit of your brain that you did when you were a kid, that bit of your brain that would look at something and go, what if? And that would be creative and would ignore the rules. As engineers, we build the rules, we follow them very well. And one of the best things you can learn is to just soften those up a bit and just explore.
Awesome.
Very good. What's next for you, Laura? What's in your inbox?
What's next? Well, I'm going to speak at a few wonderful conferences. So you can come say hi to me at any of the YOW conferences in Australia later in the year. And I'm also hosting the security track at QCon in London next year. So we'll have a whole curated day of security awesomeness. Podcast is, we've got lots of wonderful people coming on and collecting stories, so you can check us out at Build Amazing Things Securely. We're much smaller podcast than this one. These are professionals. We're kind of mostly making it up.
I don't know about that, but
we've been making it up for a long time.
We made a career making it up.
And next year, we're hoping to find ways for, all those smaller companies out there. So if you work for a giant organization, this probably isn't for you. But if you're at one of those, between 50 engineers and 200 engineers, smaller size, we're going to be releasing a whole bunch of free resources and guides for how to build an AppSec program when you don't have any specialists or huge budgets and fancy things. So watch the space. Lots of giving out in the community, a lot of talking to folks. And if anyone ever wants to come and chat, AppSec, I'm irritatingly easy to find, and you can come and have a chat. I'd always love to learn what you're up to.
Fantastic. Laura, this has been amazing. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a